big bad one. Give it a good smash. Hey guys, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. So I'm going to do a little bit of a life update here for you. As some of you know, I really didn't feel good this past week. I want to update you on that. We are going to go down and milk the girls and look at things in the garden, and I do have a little bit of food preservation to tackle today. It's going to be kind of a hodgepodge, but this is my life. It's a lovely life. But before I do anything, my freeze dryer is done. I'm going to pack that up while I kind of bring you up to speed on what the doctor said when I visited him this week. So there's actually a little bit of a backstory to what's going on. It is the growing season right now. Usually we don't have to feed hay during the growing season, but sometimes in our smaller pastures, it's kind of nice to make sure that the boys have enough to eat that I can feed hay. And so I usually like to have at least a few bales of hay on hand, especially for rainy days. When the girls don't go out and graze, I can feed that. So in May, I think it was May, our guy said he had some hay for us. I was pretty surprised. We like to buy hay from this gentleman because we know it's a no spray hay. It's not sprayed with anything, so we can use our animals' manure and even the hay if needed on our gardens and stuff, and it's not going to hurt it. So we've had a very wet spring. It's no longer spring, but we had a very wet spring, and it was actually really welcome from the drought that we had last year. I felt like we all just really needed it to be a wet spring. But I was kind of surprised that they were able to take off the hay with so much wetness, because we really didn't have much time in between rains. And when you bale hay, you really have to let it dry out in the field so that you're not cramming hay together that's wet. You can really risk mold at that point. But he's been baling hay for a long time, and so I trusted him. He did add a little bit more salt to the hay, which can be a good way to dry it. The hay was great. I mean, it's always great. We love the hay. Our goats love the hay from this farm. But after a little while, I went to go feed some hay, and I noticed, like, I pulled back a flake and just this puff of mold just filled the air. It's really not good for anybody. It's not good for goats to eat. So what we did was we actually just put a lot of it out in our field. We opened the bales and spread them out. We put some of the hay on our compost piles. We've got 2 different compost piles. And I also spread some of it out underneath some of our rabbit tractors just to have somewhere to put it. Of course, over the process of opening up all of these moldy bales of hay and spreading them out, like, mold is flying everywhere, and we know it's not good for us, and we were like covering our noses with our shirts and stuff and just kind of powering through. This is something that we know that farmers have to deal with, and if everybody else can deal with it, we can deal with it too. And I mean, it really wasn't too bad. We did the thing and kind of just cared for our bodies as well as we could afterward. And Levi was fine. We didn't allow the kids to be around it at all, but that very night I had a lot of chest pain. Whenever I would breathe in, it was pretty hard to get a full breath, and just a lot of pain right here, right in the middle. So because of what we had done that day, I knew what the pain was. I knew my body was dealing with some of the mold, and I trust my body to be able to act as it should. It was doing what it should. I could tell I was getting an immune response to the mold, which is normal when you inhale that much mold. I was starting to get a little bit of lymph pain, which is normal when your body encounters something. That's a good reaction. It's not bad. Your body reacting to things with fevers and a little bit of pain is your body doing its job. I know that. I tried to support my body with teas and good nutrition, and I was better within a couple days. As a side note too, the guy that we bale our hay from, before we even had a chance to tell him about the moldy hay, he had called me and said, Heather, you know, don't use that hay. Some of it that we kept is starting to mold. If you haven't disposed of it, bring it back. We'll put it on our gardens, and I'm going to replace it. So we actually did replace the hay. We've got all kinds of it in the barn now, and it's beautiful. It's not moldy. We had actually left a couple of the moldy bales of hay just sort of around. There's actually a few still behind my house. There's a couple over by the barn. We eventually kind of ran out of places to put it, and we're getting kind of tired. It was hot, it was humid, and we really weren't wanting to expose ourselves too much to the mold spores, and so I just left a couple hanging around, deciding that we would deal with them at a later date. And I mean, we noticed that the bales that we left outside were really just getting sun bleached. It was really hot. After the really rainy spring, we actually had probably a good 5-6 weeks where we didn't get enough rain, and so the bales really on the outside had dried out, had bleached out, and I wasn't worried about them. Once the dry spell let up and we did get quite a lot of rain, it was essentially overnight that those bales turned completely black with mold. There was a serious mold bloom in those bales, and I noticed it. We don't allow our kids to play on them. We don't really get too close to the hay bales, but I mean, they're like mold bombs just sitting out on our property and on our lawn, and I walk by them every day. I think it was Monday this past week, I felt the chest pain again, and this time I was a little bit confused. I hadn't really drawn the parallel with the mold quite yet. All I knew is I was getting these chest pains and these lymphatic pains, and the rest of my family wasn't. So I got a little bit worried that maybe it wasn't something environmental, maybe there's something up with me. I do have family history of heart issues on one side of my family, and my mother has like a ton of autoimmune diseases and all sorts of things wrong with her, and so it did give me pause. But I did get in contact with my doctor. I took the week off from making content, as a lot of you know, and I had a really great chat with him, and he also thinks that it's the mold. So if you don't already know, mold isn't good for you. It's not good for goats. Goats cannot eat moldy hay. As I mentioned before, they'll get a condition called goat polio, and it's very dangerous. It's oftentimes lethal. One of my friends, Letty, at the Heavenly Homestead, she had a goat with goat polio, and she managed to bring him back to health, but he went blind for a while. He was walking in circles. It really didn't look good. I really didn't think he was going to live, but she's an amazing goat keeper, and she nursed him right back to health, and he's perfect now. So I explained what was going on to my doctor. I had this chest pain upon breathing and some lymphatic pain for a couple days, and he's very convinced that it's the mold. So I'm on a couple different herbals right now to help my body take care of the mold. Again, the way that I like to do things is I don't like to take the place of my immune system. If my immune system is going to work on something, I want to let it. That's just how I function. I want to allow my body to do its job so that it doesn't forget how to do its job. As I said, we have a family history. I have a family history of autoimmune issues, and the last thing I want to do is confuse my immune system and not let it do its thing. So I'd like to support the immune system. So I'm not going on any like antifungals or anything like that at this point. What I'm doing is supportive care with my immune system, with my doctor, and really part of that supportive care is staying away from moldy hay. So Levi is going to be moving the moldy hay that we still have way back into our backfield and just letting it decompose down by his shooting berm in the back of the property. And I'm going to try to steer clear of mold and heal and feel better. So that's my life update for you guys. Be very careful around mold. Take it seriously, especially if you are somehow immune compromised or you have a family history of being immune compromised. Obviously our immune system is there and it does its job, but we really don't want to provoke it if we don't have to. So just try to be careful. So this is going to be kind of a process. It's not as simple as getting some herbals and being done. I am having blood drawn. There are different tests that I'm doing just to make sure that everything is good. I haven't had my blood checked for anything in a real long time, so I think it's a good thing for me just to have certain levels of things checked, vitamin levels checked, just so if there is something that's a little bit off, I can bring that back into balance so that my body can work optimally as it's supposed to. I know some of you are going to wonder what the heck I am bringing out of the freeze dryer. This is actually just shredded summer squash. This has been my favorite way to preserve our summer squash because I know I can add this to so many things later on. Make some breads out of it, add it to rice, stuff like that. And another thing I freeze dried was some milk. We have an overabundance of milk right now and it's such a blessing, but that's not always the case in wintertime. We do have fresh milk all winter, but we don't have this much milk in winter, and so I have a feeling that this is going to come in handy when it's cold outside. Good morning. Where's Tori? Good morning. You'll have your turn in a minute. Okay. Good girl. I had actually purchased a shade cloth for the barn. You can see it right here. It's green, so it does cast kind of a green haze all over everything. I don't think it looks too bad on camera. I mean, I probably should have gone with cream, but the green matches my barn, so that's what I went with. Usually, I'm facing the other way when I get the rest of the milk out of her udder, and some goats are very particular. They don't let you do certain things even if you just change up the way that you're sitting. I was sitting the other way because it's better lighting, but I don't want to upset Calamity. So in here is where the milk falls, and I have a total of 4 ice packs in there, and that's like cold mist coming out. It's not steam or anything. But those ice packs are gonna keep the milk nice and cool. I need Calamity to stay on the stand because I would love for her to finish all of her breakfast. So we're gonna go feed and take care of the boys in the meantime. Good morning. What up? I have actually been throwing hay at this pasture because I haven't felt well. I haven't moved their fence, but I'm gonna be doing that really soon. Hello and good morning. How are you guys? Good morning. Hello. Oh, Titus, quit. The kids just brought me a tomato from their garden. I had asked them if they thought these were good because the stripy tomatoes that I have in my garden are not good. It's kind of sad. We'll go out there in a little bit and I'll show you. Oh, what do you think of them?
They're yummy. Those are one of my favorite tomatoes.
Yeah, these are a lot better than what I'm growing. Go figure. Be nice. Gracious. At what point my camera died while I was doing the chores, but it definitely did. No worries, we're gonna go back out there and check on all the baby goats in just a little bit. But one thing that I really have to think about this time of year is every single day I need to be preserving something. We have so much food coming in this time of year, and really the preservation season is only just getting started. And the one thing that we're getting a whole ton of, besides milk this time of year, is cucumbers. So I have a whole bunch of gherkin cucumbers here. And this is only the gherkins. There's a whole bunch, just as many if not more as far as like weight or volume of Bait Alpha slicer cucumbers. I will deal with those probably tomorrow, but today is the gherkins. And one of the doctor's orders for the mold exposure is to eat more fermented foods. So I have been struggling with my canned pickles being a little bit, they're just not as crisp. They're especially not as crisp as I remember grocery store pickles being, but I don't exactly like all of the ingredients that are in most grocery store pickles. There's a couple different things that you can put in your canned pickles and a couple different processes you can do to try to increase the crispness, but really the best way to ensure having a crisp pickle is to either do a fridge pickle, which is totally valid. We've done a whole bunch of fridge pickles before, especially pickled eggs. But I'm actually gonna ferment these pickles today, and I find that fermented pickles are also quite crisp. So we've got our cucumbers, I have some elephant garlic, and I've got some herbs and some tea bags, and we'll get into all of that. But the main thing that I really want to put in these jars is fresh dill. It is absolutely fresh dill season, and that is my favorite flavor. And that's in the garden, so we need to go get it. So I just remembered after walking in here that I was going to show you the black vernissage tomatoes that I'm growing. These ones I'm not super impressed with. They're beautiful and I'm still growing them, but they're just a very mealy type texture. It reminds me a lot of why a lot of people don't like tomatoes. These seem a lot like store-bought tomatoes, even though they're not. And some of you probably know what I mean by that, but a lot of store-bought tomatoes are picked green and then they're allowed to ripen inside a box while they make their trek across the country to get to the grocery store. And those kinds of tomatoes are really lacking in a lot of flavor, and they have this texture that's so hard to describe. Like mealy is the only word I can think to describe it, and it's just not good. For some reason, even though this is a homegrown tomato and it is absolutely ripe, it has that same kind of texture and flavor. And so what I'm gonna be doing with these is cutting them up and putting them in the freezer, and I'm gonna add them into sauce, and I think that they will do just fine in that application. The garden is quite the jungle at the moment. I have some dill tucked in here with the corn, and the recipe that I have that I'm loosely basing my fermentation recipe on calls for flowering dill heads as one of the main flavor components. This one is huge. It's actually past the flowering stage and these little seeds have started to develop, but this should still add quite a lot of flavor. It's nice and big. Just gotta take the little leaves out of it. There we go. Get it off. We haven't seen tomato hornworms yet. My daughter just found one. Can you get it? It ate one of your tomatoes?
Yeah.
What you can do is just take the whole leaf, like this. Yeah.
He's big. He's a big caterpillar.
That's a big bad one. You might check for more wherever you see damage. I actually don't see a whole ton of damage there for how big he is.
But up there, there's a lot. And on the other side is a...
Oh, I see.
Right down here is a half-eaten tomato.
Okay. Are there more hornworms that you see?
I haven't seen any more.
Okay, well if you see them, put them in here, okay? This is probably an adequate amount of dill, I think. All right, so what I'm gonna be doing is fermenting 2 half-gallon size jars of dill cucumber pickles today. So there doesn't have to be a set recipe for what you're doing. The biggest and most important condition for fermented foods like this, lacto-fermented foods, is that your brine be salty enough. So we use a ratio of 1/4 filtered water. You don't want to use chlorinated water, and 3 tablespoons of sea salt. You want to avoid using iodized salt. The chlorine and then the added iodine in the salt, they can impede the good bacteria's growth, and we really want to, that's what we want to do. We want to culture the good bacteria, and the salt that's within this is going to kill any bad bacteria. So I've got my salt brine right here, and I'm going to be placing any loose bits, any smaller pieces of material on the bottom so that they have a less likelihood of floating. This is important because anything that rises above the brine in our ferment that is exposed to the air and maybe isn't covered by that salt water has a higher likelihood of creating or getting some kind of mold, and we want to avoid that as well. Shove it straight down in. Take my elephant garlic, give it a good smash. That's going to help the flavor really marinate. The other thing I would like to add in is a little bit of black tea. So I add this because the tannins that are in the black tea are going to be one of the things that helps keep our pickles nice and crisp. You can also use bay leaves, and from what I hear, you can use grape leaves. And this is what I have at my disposal at the moment. And one of the great things about this kind of thing, using this kind of thing, is I can actually take this tea bag here and use it to contain some of my loose ingredients. I'll show you. So I've taken off the little string, and I'm going to remove the metal staples out of here. So I've got the tea bag with the tea inside, and it's going to be open at both ends. I'm going to take the tea bag string and tie one of the ends closed. And now we have this cute little tube with an open end here. I've still got my strings hanging, that's important. What this is gonna do, it's gonna allow me a little satchel to put more loose ingredients. So let's say I didn't have any fresh dill right now, and all I could get were those like little tiny dry dill fronds from the store. Those are absolutely gonna float and really can incorporate or encourage a little bit of mold growth in the ferment, which again we want to avoid. So doing something like this and packing the herbs in something like this is a great way to keep the herbs below the brine while also imparting lots of good flavor. I have this pickling spice that I picked up from the store. I'm going to add a teaspoon of that into the little satchel. I'm going to fold this over and use the rest of the string to tie this completely closed. Just like that, our little aromatic satchel with the tannins to keep everything crisp is perfect and done, and can go straight into the jar. Now we've got our cucumbers. There's a lot of them here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to fit them all in the jar, but I have not washed these. You could, but I would encourage you to use chlorine-free water if you can. I don't have that on tap, and I really need to refill my water filter, so I'm just going to be brushing off the little spines, brushing off the blossom end. You can cut the blossom end off. That's supposed to help with bitterness and help with crispness as well. I'm going to elect not to do that, but you definitely could if you needed to or you wanted to. The reason that you don't want to wash your cucumbers with chlorinated water is, again, you don't want to be killing any of the good bacteria. You don't want anything getting into the jar that's going to inhibit the growth of the good bacteria, and that does include chlorinated water. I guess if you washed them and patted them dry well enough, that would probably be okay, but I also don't want to be washing off the good bacteria, and there's plenty of that on these. All right, so now the jars are fully packed, and it's time to add the brine. And as I mentioned before, it's going to be really important that we keep all the food below the brine, so I'm going to want to obviously cover up all of the food. I like to tamp it down just a little bit to release any air bubbles. There's going to be a lot of air bubbles, little small ones happening as the fermentation process progresses, but I do want to get some of the bigger ones out just so I can ensure that we don't have any food being exposed. So this is how we're going to ensure that everything stays below the brine. This is a fermentation weight. You don't necessarily have to use something like this. If I had you know, one of those 4-ounce canning jars. Something like that would work really well in here to keep the food down below the brine. And one of the reasons you want to fill something like that with the brine, you can also use a plastic like sandwich bag or freezer bag, is if somehow there is a leak in like the seal of the little jar or of the plastic bag, you're just leaking brine into the brine. You're not like watering down your brine with water, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is just take this weight and drop it down in. Classic, I put way too much brine in there. That is okay. I always make a mess, and I always say, if you don't make a mess, it doesn't count. And there's a couple different things you could do from here. I have fermented before by just using these lids and putting it on loosely. What our goal is though, is not to create a completely tight seal, because this is going to ferment and there's going to be fermentation gases created, and I don't want to be screwing this on so tight that those gases are not able to release. So if I put this on loosely like that, this top lid here is still able to flex and move and allow those gases out. So we could do that, or I have these pretty neat fermentation lids here. These are stretchy and they just stretch over the top, and on the inside it has this little ball bearing that keeps things sealed, but as the gases build up, they push up on that little ball bearing and they can escape right out the middle there. There's a whole bunch of different types of fermentation lids, airlock lids that allow the air to escape but don't allow anything bad to get in your jar. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do it, and those are just a couple ways. So all that's left to do now is leave these out on the counter and let them do their thing. There is going to be a little bit of bubble action, and there can be some overspill, a lot like this. So it's a good idea to have them inside some kind of tray as they sit out on the counter. And you're gonna wanna taste them after about 3 to 5 days and see if it's fermented to your liking. I like to let things sit at least 7 to 10 days because I like more of that lacto-fermented flavor. Got this bucket lid here that has this little rim. This is going to be perfect for catching any kind of overspill that might occur. I am going to move my clabber culture here to a different part. I'll probably put this inside the house because I don't like my ferments to be too close together. When you allow that, you can get a little bit of cross culturing going on, which isn't always a bad thing, but sometimes when two different ferments try to culture each other, there's like a battle there that prevents either culture from being strong, and you just get a risk of there being a bad outcome. So I'm going to take this clabber culture inside. What this is, it's just milk that got a little bit old in the fridge, and what I can do is just leave it out on the counter, allow it to sour and clabber. And I actually really like this as a cream cheese substitute. I've made cottage cheese out of clabber before. One of my favorite things to do is just to spoon it out into a bowl, add some jam on top, and you have a really amazing cultured breakfast.
Hey, gorgeous. Hi, Tori. Hello, man. Yeah. Now we have Stormy. Stormy's getting real big, huh? Good girl. Of course, Calamity. Look at these guys. Shivani, those babies are as big as you trying to drink. Oh my goodness. You're such a good mama. You really are. Looks like I left the water on again. Are you having a good time? It's always a fun time when Mom leaves the water on, huh? Yeah.
Calamity, leave the camera alone. Don't touch it.
You too. Just leave it alone. Be candid. Be candid. There she is. There's Sunny. Sunny's doing so well. Hello, ma'am. Hi, sweet girl. Little Sunny here is one of the babies that was having a real hard time with anemia, but she's looking so good. She's gaining weight. She's still pretty tiny, but that's kind of par for the course for a baby that has suffered a few times with coccidia. But I'm pretty sure that coccidia is behind us, but I guess I'll probably knock on wood. Gotta find some wood. What do you smell? Marzi. He scared the goats, but not too bad. Sometimes he just comes out of nowhere and he scares them enough where they just run back to the barn. But no, not today. Oof. What a good boy. What a good boy. Some of the goats are way over there, like Christine, still by the barn, Alpus, Fury. We're gonna have to see what happens when Tizzy ends up having babies sometime in the future, but I think that she genuinely may have gotten some moon spots from her daddy. Now, Stormy's moon spots are really obvious. It's these really pretty, strikingly colored spots on her. She's got some dark ones, she's got some gray ones, super pretty. But really with moon spots, they can just be this little tan color. And it'll be interesting to see if you pass any of that along. I'm suspicious. See, this is white, obviously. Moon spots can't be white, and they can't be on white. But see that? That is not white. And neither is this. This is like a tan. It's hard to tell with that little one. Huh. I'm pretty regardless. I am. Trying to get kicked in the face. Well, the girls sure are enjoying the pasture, and the pasture is quite tall. It's actually taller than most of the goats at certain points, which is really good. So I'm gonna get inside. I'm gonna upload this video so you guys can have your update. Thank you so much for keeping all of our health in your prayers. I'm pretty sure things are on the mend, that we understand what happened and what is going on and what to do for the future. So I think the takeaway here is stay away from moldy hay if you can. And if you do have to dispose of it, try to do it in a smart way. Don't just breathe in all of that dust like I did. It's not good for you. I had touched on it briefly when we were making the fermented cucumbers, the pickles, that I have made cottage cheese out of clabbered milk before. I had actually made a video on that process a little while ago, and I'm gonna stick that right here if you'd like to give it a click.